think sometimes that pursuit or that dream or that ideal or the idea of what, like, the perfect day or the pleasure that would be involved in that, I think that for some people can become a real escape from reality. It can be something that they really chase after. And not that there's anything wrong with that, and sometimes asking those kinds of questions really get us in touch with not only what we're longing for, but maybe, you know, what's missing in our life right now. If we desperately want sleep, maybe there's something about how we're living right now that might need to change. So those are good questions to be asking, but it's a dangerous side to it if it becomes something that starts to take on a life of its own. And this fantasy, this idea of what it would be starts to really take over our lives. And that's when maybe we're kind of tipping over into something that's going to be destructive rather than something that we're created for. So this idea of pleasure is really a tricky one. So we're talking about idols and idolatry, and what we chase after is what forms us, and we chase after other gods, and it can bring all these troubles in our lives. And, because idolatry really is about adultery. It's about being unfaithful to God. It's about taking something other than God, usually a gift that God gives us, and trying to make it a God for us, trying to put it in the center instead of things. This idea that God is jealous for us, and so these things aren't bad in of themselves, but if they become replacement gods, then God gets angry about it. He wants to rip that away from us because He wants the best for us, even if we're willing to settle for something else. Go ahead and go forward. A couple things. So I said we're going to be talking about Ecclesiastes. Go ahead a couple more here. Skip into this idea of pleasure. And I want to read just a section of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes is a book written by the teacher, attributed to Solomon, the son of David, the greatest of the kings. You know, David's kingdom, he's the one everyone looks back to, but really under Solomon, the kingdom reached its greatest potential. The borders were at its biggest. The temple was built, and the riches and wealth of the kingdom and the security of the kingdom were really established. This is the height and the heyday of the nation of Israel. But Solomon himself asked for wisdom from God, and he used his wisdom to try to kind of search out what is the point behind all these things. And the book of Ecclesiastes is really a very postmodern book if you read it. It's kind of a strange book. You read it, and it's everything's meaningless, and everything's, it's like like waiting for Godot. It's almost absurdist in the sense in which he's exploring these, he's taking them all to these extremes and finding they're so empty. Everything's meaningless under the sun. And really that under the sun is a key interpretive phrase there. It says life as we know it, as we experience it here, now, there's just something wrong with it. It doesn't quite work. There needs to be something transcendent, something that breaks into it to make sense of things. But he sets his heart to try to explore all these different things, find out what is life for, what should we be chasing after. And one of the things he decides to chase after is the idea of pleasure. So I want to read kind of what his exploration, his idea is. Now go ahead back. You just gave away my joke. But no, go back. We're not supposed to get there yet. So I'm going to read Ecclesiastes 2, verses 1 through, I believe, 11. Yes. So I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is madness, and what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was good for the people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned some more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this my wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was a reward for all my toil. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. So we hear of this kind of decadence, this excess, and all sorts of things that were wrong about that, is buying slaves and reaching up things. And it's under Solomon that we also have some laborers that are being mistreated and people forced into labor, and there's all sorts of problems crop up. You have Solomon, the ladies' man, with his thousands of wives and concubines and everything like that. And of course, that leads to trouble, because with those foreign wives came their foreign gods, and here we are back at idolatry again. And God's not angry, and as a result, the kingdom gets split, and we have all sorts of problems that come with this. So, but this was Solomon chasing after all this stuff, and that's really the goal of life for so many people, is to deny my heart nothing that I desire. That we think that if we have any sort of desire, we won't be happy unless we can satisfy that desire. And now, of course, there's been the opposite extreme in Christianity at times where people is this self-denial, and it's like we try to beat ourselves up and deny that any desire is good at all. And so then there's the overreaction against that in the 60s and other places where they're saying, hey, let's get rid of all these restraints and just indulge our every desire. And this is what's going to finally free us up as people. But Solomon tried that, and it's been tried, and people have found that it's still empty, it's still meaningless, and they're still looking for something else. So how are we to figure out what this desire is supposed to be? If we think that we're just to deny ourselves nothing, there's no place in our lives to say no to anything, whether it be food or pleasures of any kind. We have that idea in our culture, but I remember when we had the men's conference a year ago, there's a guy from Pure Life, and he was telling us his story. And his story was just this idea. It started with him. It was about sexual purity, the conference was, and he was talking about how it started with just fantasies and moved on to pornography and moved from there on to prostitutes and all sorts of stuff. I mean, this guy's life just went crazy. And he finds himself with separate bank accounts and hotel rooms that he's got, and he's living this complete other life while he's married, he has kids, all this other stuff's going on, and but so much of his heart and his imagination and his money and everything was going into this, and he found himself even starting to have fantasies of even kind of violence, rape, and he realized that things were starting to spiral out of control, and he was found out, and everything fell apart, But the reality for him was just like with all addicts, that this idea that you got to have more, and the next time it's got to be more. There's that law of diminishing returns. Now I can put the picture up there. I've got our addict there. This is the picture of addiction. Cookie Monster. It says, when one cookie is never enough. That's the definition of addiction. One cookie is never enough. But for him, it was not cookie, it was something else. But that law of diminishing returns with addicts, where their whole lives are wrapped around their addiction, and it's about being fixated on that next fix. And the next time you need more, and you build up this tolerance. With physical drugs, it's got to be more. Alcohol, it's got to be more. You don't get the same effect unless you do more. And so you're never satisfied. You're never fulfilled. No matter what you do, there's always going to be that next craving, that next thing. And it comes closer and closer, and you need more and more to fixate it. And it's that slippery slope where first it's just kind of some thoughts, and then it's some harmless images you look at. And then real people get involved, and other stuff begins to happen. And what happened to him that he could pursue those things? Became a person, a monster, a person that he did not want to be. All because he would deny himself nothing. He thought that these are natural, possibly, that you're just supposed to pursue that. And happiness is found in meeting your every desire. But it's easy to point to an addict or an alcoholic. You talk about the slippery slope that they start doing, lying and stealing, and the boundaries getting blurry and being crossed. And it's easy to look at that and see when it's gotten to that train wreck kind of stage, how their life has been so wrapped up and messed up by this addiction. But how far have we gone? What have we been willing to compromise or sacrifice for something that we want? When it's come down to where have we started to blur the lines? Where have we started to take those first steps? It may not be as far down the slope, but you may be dangerously close to the edge, and to the point where it's going to be hard to get back up. And it's not just with purity, it may be with any other kind of pleasure or something that's just, you realize that maybe I'm giving too much of my heart to this. And my mind is wrapped up a little bit too much about thinking about when I'm going to get that next opportunity. Because the boundaries are there for a reason. And they're to protect us from this kind of thing, from these slippery slopes. And when the boundaries get blurry and we start crossing them, we're in a dangerous place. Like when we go to High Cliffs Park and Owen wants to walk right along the edge of the cliff. Because it's fun and we dance around and because he sees his dad doing it sometimes. But but there's a fence there that you're not supposed to climb over, and it's there for a reason. Because sometimes we think that these boundaries are just restrictive, they're just arbitrary, but they're gifts from God. They protect the pleasure. They keep it in its right place where it can be fully enjoyed in heaven. Because God is all for pleasure, but we sometimes mess it up by crossing the boundaries. There's a story in Kyle Alleman's book where he talks about how his daughter wanted a pet. And he said, okay, you can have a pet, but it can't have any fur, can't make any noise. And he had this whole list of things. And so what they decided, go ahead, the pet that they were able to get was a fish. So they got a goldfish. So they bring the goldfish home, and they're all excited about having this goldfish and having this pet. But there's not really much you can do with a goldfish. I mean, you can't, though I used to take my roommate in college, we used to take his goldfish out and pet it. But he didn't like it when we did that. Not the fish, the roommate. I don't think the fish even really cared. And goldfish can't remember anything, so a few seconds later he wouldn't even have known. But you can't really pet goldfish, can't play with them, you can't teach them tricks. There's not much you can do except feed them to the point where they will kill themselves because they'll just keep eating if you give them food. So, but they wanted to play with it. So they thought, we'll go swimming with a goldfish. And they went down, they had a pool in the backyard, and they brought the fish down in this bowl right next to it. And you could see her mind thinking, maybe we could put the fish in the pool and swim around with the fish. And he was like, but that's probably not a good idea. And he's trying to explain to his daughter, there's chemicals in there, it's probably not a good idea. But even as he's explaining, they look over and they see the bowl is empty. And the fish has jumped out and got into the pool. And so the fish is swimming around the pool, huge pool, and they're thinking, this is great. And they try to get in and they try to chase it, but there's really no way you're going to catch a goldfish that has gotten into a pool until it stops swimming. Go ahead and put the next one up. And then you can catch it pretty easily because it's dead. So, this is the shock and awe here. Kathy, what kind of sermon is this? Because it seems like freedom. It seems like this is what we're made for. A goldfish is made to swim. It's made to be free. So we think that this would be what's best for it, is to break out of that little bowl of boundaries that keep it confined and let it into the wild expanses of the pool, right? But that will kill it. So these boundaries are there to keep us safe, to keep us from killing things. Oh man, I should have the clip from Tommy Boy that just came to my head where he's talking about his sail. And he says, I love my sail, and then I kill it! And he tears the thing apart. But if you hold on too tight, you take it out of its context, you take it where it's not supposed to be, you end up not only hurting yourself, but you end up destroying the pleasure. Taken out of context, it doesn't offer us what it promises. It doesn't offer us what it could truly offer us if we kept it in its place. Because, like I said, God is all for pleasure. Good food, hanging out with friends, playing games, laughing, hugging, kissing, even sex. These are His idea. It's a good idea. He's not against them. He likes them. He's actually very jealous for them. He longs to give good gifts to us. He's just trying to help us keep them in the proper place so we don't kill them, but can enjoy them as they were intended. Because idols are good things. These things are good things in and of themselves. But they're good things that we make into God things. We take that extra O out, and it becomes, instead of a gift, it becomes a God. Instead of something we receive, it becomes something that we sacrifice for. Something that we give ourselves to instead of receiving as a gift. Because the reality is that all these pleasures, they are God's. C.S. Lewis, in his book, The Screwtape Letters, talks about this. And The Screwtape Letters is a book of letters from a senior devil to a young devil who's in the process of trying to tempt a particular British man And so everything's upside down. You read it, and they're talking about the enemy, they're talking about God. They talk about our Father below, they're talking about the devil and his aims. And so it's kind of twisted to read it, but it's really interesting about psychology and temptation and what that is, and also about the struggles and the perspective of the enemy who comes to steal, kill, and destroy. So it's a fun read, but you have to keep in mind that everything's upside down. But in talking to his nephew, Wormwood, Screwtape writes this. He says, he's a hedonist at heart, talking about God. All those fasts and vigils and stakes and crosses are only a facade, or only like foam on the seashore. Out at sea, out in his sea, there is pleasure and more pleasure. He makes no secret of it. At his right hand are pleasures forevermore. I don't think he has the least inkling of that high and austere mystery to which we rise in the miserific vision from the other side. He's vulgar, Wormwood. He has a bourgeois mind. He has filled his world full of pleasures. There are things for humans to do all day long without his minding in the least. Sleeping, washing, eating, drinking, making love, playing, praying, working. Everything has to be twisted before it's of any use to us. We fight under cruel disadvantages. Nothing is naturally on our side. In God, there are pleasures forevermore. Out in his sea, there's pleasure after pleasure. This world is full of pleasures that we are intended to enjoy. The Bible contains all sorts of commands to be joyful, always to rejoice, to live our lives filled with joy, and the joy that is a fruit of the Spirit that God desires for us. Pleasure is God's idea. He loves it. And the problem with it, when it comes from the other side, is that it gets twisted. They have to take it and twist it. Because naturally, it would lead us to God. Instead, it gets twisted in our lives and it leads us away. It becomes a God instead of a gift, as I said. So the problem is not with the pleasure. The problem is with us. The problem is with our desire for the pleasure that gets disordered. C.S. Lewis again writes in an essay, Weight of Glory, famous words, this description that he has, that he's talking in the beginning about the weight of glory. He's saying that we desire too little, he says. He says that nearly every description of what we shall ultimately find if we do follow God, it contains an appeal to desire. Instead of self-denial, it had become vogue. He says we've taken the Christian virtue of love or charity, and we've replaced it with self-denial. As if that was the point. That the whole point of life was to deny ourselves. And he says, no, the whole point is love. And this self-denial runs contrary to what the Bible talks about. God's trying to woo us with desire. He's trying to open us into real life and real joy. And so he says, if we consider the unblushing promises of reward and the staggering nature of the rewards promised in the Gospels, it would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We're half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased. So pleasure is something that should lead us to God. And we accept these half things instead. It's because our imagination is so impoverished. Because we give our mind and our imagination to small things. Things like drink and ambition and sex, he says. We give ourselves to those as if that was the main thing. We wrap our lives around pursuing these small things. And our imaginations get so stunted that we can't even understand what God is trying to offer us. And so we stay content chasing after these other things that never will make us content. And we need to have our imaginations opened up. We need to be understanding the true nature, the joy that is to be found. If we really want to chase after pleasure, we should be searching for it where it can be best found. In the eternal pleasures that are at God's right hand. The joy that he is. And we think of God, we often think of God as being upset or angry. We think of God in all sorts of other kinds of things, but we rarely think of God as being full of joy. We think of maybe that we disappoint God and that he's grieving, but the fact that God is joyful that God enjoys being God, that God delights in the fact that he can do whatever he chooses to do, that he can create and enjoy his creation and interact with it, that God even in himself is this joyful, loving relationship of the Trinity. And we settle for so little. So that's the other side of it. Emily jumped the gun there. We have our constant adolescence that we talk about, and especially with young men, that it's in their 30s or 40s before they finally start to grow up, because the ideal in the culture is just this kind of childlike, do whatever you want, no responsibilities, and all sorts of stuff. And this is the end result. It's not the life of adventure and desire that everybody thinks that they set out to do. They end up as half asleep on the couch, watching something, playing a video game, interacting with the world only, briefly and virtually and tangentially instead of directly. Because the other side of this idea of pursuing pleasure, some people are so addicted to things that you can see it, wrap their minds around it. But the other part, really in our culture, the flip side of it is this avoidance of pain or hardship. We try to avoid any sort of pain, any sort of struggle, any sort of hardship in our lives. We try to get rid of it as quick as we can. We try to avoid people. We try to medicate ourselves. Whatever it is that we can do to kind of numb and distract ourselves so that we don't have to face hard things. We don't as a society, we try to avoid struggle and pain at all costs. And so it's not even just this idea of pursuing pleasure. It's the idea that if it hurts, it's bad. If it feels good, it's good. So we'll pursue that, but if it hurts at all, or if it becomes hard at all, it's bad. And it's to be avoided. When the relationship starts to become kind of a drain, instead of constantly giving me what I want out of it, we just walk away from it. Because we try to avoid pain and hardship at all kinds. So there's either the frantic pursuit of pleasure, or there's an avoidance of pain at all costs. We distract ourselves with TV, games, and hobbies that are literally mind-numbing. And we avoid hard decisions, thinking about painful things, leading us to try to bury or cover over painful realities that are half-healed. But God waits to bring us healing. He longs to meet us in the real mess, the hard and the painful things. It's not that he's absent, it's that we refuse to go to those dark places and find him there, where he's bringing his light and his healing. So, and again, what would life look like if we carried this to the extreme? If our whole goal in life was just to avoid pain, if we avoid anything hard or struggle, we'd never accomplish anything. No education, no career, even getting better at the hobbies and sports and things that we desire. Even that, there's a point to which even something we enjoy doing, we have to push through in order to get better at it. We'd never take the risk of building a friendship or a romantic relationship. We'd definitely never have kids, because the good part of it comes with that negative part, and that's part of it. We just float along with enough in perpetual childhood dependence, and it's exactly what more and more people are willing to do. They're living pseudo-lives made up of internet, movies, video games, eating prepackaged and processed food, or whatever you can microwave or get from a drive-thru. It's ironic that people who claim to be just going with the flow or doing what feels right often live lives that are remarkably empty of anything that anyone would claim was really all that pleasurable. Sitting in the dark by themselves before a screen, experiencing only vicarious pleasures rather than the real thing. Because the true pleasures in life, the lasting, enduring ones, are all on the other side of sacrifice and struggles. The happy marriage is not the blissfully ignorant couple on their wedding day, but the one that has weathered the hardships and painful moments that we inflict on each other. And you won't be able to enjoy your kids if you aren't willing to sacrifice for them and discipline and teach them. And friendships won't last if you aren't willing to be present in hard times, to work to stay close and spend time with each other, even when it's not easy, it doesn't come naturally. Even a good meal takes time, takes effort, takes some expense of some kind. Especially if you share it with others, rather than sitting alone in your car eating while you drive someplace. And your relationship with God will never produce the fruit of the Spirit, including the peace and joy we long for, if you aren't willing to sacrifice and discipline yourself and spend time pursuing God, chasing after Him. Jesus models this with His life of service and sacrifice. We have Hebrews chapter 12 urges us to imitate Jesus as we run the race set before us amidst the great crowd of witnesses before, with, and behind us who are chasing after Jesus. We're talking about the great cloud of witnesses. Then he goes into this passage here. The author says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart." Consider him. Chase after this. For the joy set before him, endured the cross, the hard things. The joy was on the other side of the cross. Emily this year was in something called Girls on the Run. And it's a wonderful program offered in especially underprivileged schools, and there's certain parameters about it, but they have mentors, and they run with them, and they run with a partner, and it all leads up to them running a 5K together. So they run this race together, and they run with their partners and running partners, but the whole time they've been running together, they've been building each other up. There's these circles where they encourage and they speak the good things that they see in other people, and they kind of call each other out and encourage each other, and there's a support. And the point isn't to be the fastest runner. It's not competition. It's encouragement. We're all in this together. So somehow, even in this idea of running a race, they instill this quality of that we're doing it together, and that you're trying to do your personal best. You set goals for yourself, and you run after them. But it's in the context of a community that everyone's trying to do the same thing. That you're running faster doesn't come at the expense of somebody else. We all are trying to run our best, and the point is to cross the finish line. And it's really great to go and see this 5K as each person comes and crosses the finish line, and they're celebrated. And as it goes longer, stragglers are starting to come in. It seems like the celebrations get that much bigger, because so the other runners who have finished are there also waiting for them at the finish line. And everyone is celebrating as the last ones finish this arduous thing that they've set out to do. It's hard for them. It doesn't come easy. And as they cross the finish line, they're celebrated. And it's a wonderful picture of what it would be like for us to pursue our goals, to do our best, to lean into running, but to do it as part of a group of people that are trying to support and encourage each other. That you persevere and you sacrifice for a point to cross that finish line. So running this race requires discipline and perseverance, and Jesus shows us the way. He's the author, the pioneer of the faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross and scorned its shame. So consider his example. Perseverance and sacrifice. Don't grow weary or lose heart in the midst of our race, when we have to deny ourselves certain things for the sake of greater joys, when we have to keep those things in the boundaries that they're supposed to be. We have to wait and not take something out of place or out of time. Let Jesus' life remind us to do hard things, to be willing to make sacrifices, and to find the depths of pleasure that are only found on the other side of pain, the joy on the other side of the cross. This idea of pleasure and avoiding pain, these twin idols that we have. As we've been talking about, those aren't things that you can just destroy by removing them. We talked about how you can't just smash the idols. The idols are not defeated by being removed. Go ahead. But they have to actually be replaced. That you replace your idols, and instead there's something, it's about chasing after God more fully. It's about taking all of these different things that have distracted us and somehow turning them into the very means by which we chase after God. These pleasures don't have to be something that pull away. We don't have to just cut off and deny them. But in them, in our desires, and in Him through them, and receiving them as gifts from God in the right time and place, they can become a means by which we chase after God and are formed rightly. When we follow our hearts, follow our desires, to lead us to their true end. There was a campaign in Britain, I think 2010 it started, and it came to the U.S. and Australia and a couple different places. Go ahead and put the picture up there. But it was an atheist group that put these signs on buses in Britain all over the place. It says, "There's probably no God. Now stop worrying and enjoy your life." This idea of God was just causing anxiety, was keeping people from enjoying their life. Some of them just said there's no God. This said there's probably no God. At least they are aware that they're not certain about that either. But there's probably no God, so now stop worrying and enjoy your life. That this is the key. Just like in the 60s, the key was to get rid of all the restrictions around sex and all this kind of stuff, and then we can enjoy sex. And instead, we have sexually transmitted diseases and all sorts of pain and all sorts of messed up families and things that go along with that mentality of enjoying sex without the boundaries, without the limitations. And just get rid of God, and then you can enjoy life. I would suggest that in order for us to replace the idol of pleasure and enjoyment of our life and avoidance of pain, we actually have to do the other thing, the other exact opposite of this. Go ahead. We have to enjoy life, and we enjoy life with God. That we let our desires lead us to God. We share our desires with God. So what I would say is if you're afraid that a particular pleasure in your life is maybe becoming too strong, there's two different things that you could do. One is you could say, I need to cut it out, I need to get rid of it, and the discipline of fasting is legitimate. You know, if I say, I spend too much time planning my day around where I'm going to swing into the gas station and get a 32-ounce Mountain Dew. Ooh, and then when I'm on the way, I can... If that's become too much a part of my life, then I can just say, you know what, I'm going to give it up. And I do that frequently. and then I start drinking it again. But then I just say, it's ridiculous how much I think about this little thing. It's too important to me. I need to just cut it out. And I fast from it. But the other thing that you could do is if you have a certain area of, say maybe it's food. You love food. And so one thing you do is you can try to beat yourself up and eat only things that taste terrible. And eat as little of it as possible. But the other thing you could do is you could eat that food, maybe not in excess or craziness, but eat good food and enjoy it. This seems counterproductive, but if you truly enjoy it with God, find God in that pleasure. Thank you for making this food and this combination of things and giving me the time and the money and the energy to be able to enjoy this. I don't have to deny myself this pleasure. This is a pleasure. This is a gift you want to give me. I want to receive it with joy and gratitude. I want to share it with you as I sit around this table. I want to look for you in and behind and through it. The pleasure that I find in this is really just trying to lead me to you. It's just a foretaste of where fullness of pleasure can be found. And so I am going to enjoy this fully as a gift from you. I'm going to thank you for it. And I'm going to let it lead me to you, instead of leading me away from you. So there might be times when you need to fast or deny yourself. That is a part of kind of pursuing that greater joy. But maybe you just need to lean into it more fully and put it in its proper context by sharing that joy with God. Now, if it's a pleasure that you can't bring God into, it's probably something you shouldn't be doing. If you can't say, I really enjoy this thing that is totally illegal and I shouldn't be doing, it's destroying me and her, or whatever it is going to be, and if you can't bring God into it in a way that even you can somehow remotely justify, it's probably something you're not supposed to be doing. But if it's a legitimate pleasure that hasn't been twisted completely out of character, to bring it back into, bring God into it, share that joy with God, that destroys it of its God-like power. Because when you take this thing that's become a God in your life and you bring the real God into it, there's no comparison. It undercuts even the possibility of this becoming a God for you because you've intentionally brought the real living God into interaction with it. So I would suggest that maybe one way of making sure that pleasure doesn't become an idol in your life is that when you are doing something that's pleasurable, make sure you bring God into it. It will expand your joy and it will make sure that that joy stays in its proper place rather than becoming something that leads us away from God. So let your pleasures guide you to God. And like I said, that will also maybe bring some conviction that will, if you're honestly willing to share with God, you may find Him kind of saying, well, maybe this was a bit too much. Maybe you do this too often. Maybe there's a place for this, but the place is different from what you're doing. And let Him do that. But to just share that joy with God. So that's kind of the practical thing. Last week I talked about if pride or success is an issue that you need to maybe pursue doing something in secret that we'll never be able to claim credit for or nobody will ever know about. This is the kind of practical play of making sure pleasure doesn't become. It's just that to take our pleasures to God and let Him kind of correct them and let Him expand them and let us them unlock their full potential for us to enjoy a life that God wants to give us. So let's pray. God, we do thank you for your good gifts, for your pleasures that you give us, that you long for us to be fulfilled and satisfied. But you know that that quick fulfillment often just short circuits your true plan. So help us to pursue our pleasures in a way that gives honor to the one who gives them to us, that keeps them in their proper place, as things to be enjoyed and for us to be able to thank you for them and find you in them. And if there's areas of our lives where that's not the case, where we have either not let you in, or if we let you in, we find that this is an area that we're not doing rightly, we're not receiving this gift as you intend, help us to have the courage to make a break, make changes, make it clear that you alone are worthy of giving our whole hearts to. Holy Spirit, if there's something that you need to speak to us about now, just pray that we would be open to hear it. And give us the courage to endure whatever cross or self-denial you might be calling us to for the sake of the joy that is set before us. Pray this in Jesus' name.